you all. Thank you for that generous, kind introduction. Rather than go through the history, I want to make one point on communism, and that was that in the 1950s in Hawaii, the Communist Party decided the best way to turn America communist was to penetrate the Democratic Party. And it was a conscious effort. There are hearings in which it's openly discussed. The conclusion coming out of World War II was the United States was not going to have a classic Marxist revolution. And the whole theory of class warfare was really a fiction, a fabrication. It wasn't going to happen that way. But rather, another path was going to be taken. I want to focus today, in this time, on trying to explain something that I think is fundamental, and that is, what is the appeal of communism? Because it's amazing that this essentially lie can and has populated so many minds and is currently in the process of capturing the youth of America in our universities. Those who have lived under communism know the truth of communism, but it's very hard to explain. When I was at Harvard in the 1970s getting my PhD, John Rawls, who was a philosophy professor, developed a theory of justice as fairness. Okay, now this was revolutionary because what he was trying to argue is that social injustices, which is, for instance, inequality of income, racial inequality, various inequalities which we as a nation have addressed and continue to address, can be resolved through a society which redistributes income, which has centralized control, and in fact, it's the only way you'll achieve justice is fairness. Now, in terms of classical political philosophy, Plato, Socrates, discussions in Plato's writings, Aristotle, it was never assumed that justice would be fairness. That was equality, it was not fairness. See, the fundamental aspect, and this is one of the defects that we're going to have to address, because classical political theory acknowledges that there is no fairness in life. Okay, we don't all live the same amount of time. We're not all born equally to rich parents. We don't all find ourselves coming into the world in nations which are at peace, where we can thrive. The human situation is inherently unequal and unfair. God never said it would be fair. What God said was that this was an opportunity not to experience utopia or a perfect situation where everyone would have everything they wanted, as Marx would say, everyone working to their maximum to produce the good for all, and everyone would live happily thereafter. It doesn't happen. Classical political theory realizes that there is inequities, that life is not fair, and that we're going to spend most of our time fighting government, because governments inherently grab power, lie, and form tyrannies. And what our founding fathers were most concerned about was not to make America fair. Slavery was there. They couldn't eliminate slavery when the Constitution was written. But what they knew was that they had to preserve liberty, the First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. And of the founders who recognized the sin and the horror of slavery, they realized it was going to take another second revolution in order to solve the problem, and it did. Abraham Lincoln did not start fighting the Civil War to end slavery, but he finished it up to end slavery. And he knew from the beginning that this was a great sin and crime that had to be eliminated. We're constantly going to have to deal in society with sins and crimes and problems. Life is problem. If your children are born, you've got to educate them. They misbehave, you've got to correct them. The human situation, which classically, in terms of biblical teaching, we are a fallen race. Original sin, and that's the fundamental condition. Communism comes on, and our students are being taught in universities of social justice. Not to say anything that offends anyone. That communism cannot exist without causing conflict. This was one of the fundamental Saul Alinsky principles, that you have to have somebody to oppose. You have to create enemies. And currently we are the enemies. Anyone believing in Jesus Christ, anyone believing in America, in terms of its constitution, we are the enemies. Evil in these people's minds, because we don't aspire to create this perfect world of social justice in which all people are going to be treated equally and fairly. And while those are noble principles that we should all aspire to, we should all fight injustice, we are never as human beings going to eliminate injustice. We're never as human beings going to eliminate these problems. What I'm telling you is that the fundamental appeal of communism is its psychological packaging. And this very powerful psychological packaging, which to most minds hearing it, I always said students in their first year at college should read the Communist Manifesto in order to really be indoctrinated, and then following that, read the Constitution and begin seeing why the Constitution exists and why it exists, fighting this error that we can have a utopia on earth. If we do not understand the psychological appeal of communism and how it infects minds, what happens as soon as these people get in control, now they've got power, their enemies are destroyed, the people who support them are among the first to go to the concentration camp. They grab all the power for themselves, and it's a formula which produces maximum injustice, maximum inequality. Everyone's poor, everyone's enslaved. But if we do not fight the psychological appeal of communism, we're not going to win. The world will go communist, and the consequences of that will probably be World War III. And that's what we have to prevent. So thank you all for being here today, and I'll be happy to be answering questions.